Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem with Pat. Once again, on a Sunday afternoon this time, I'm spinning some Confuse. Things are getting a little noisy upstairs with the kid and the dog running around, so might as well drown that out with some of the noisiest Japanese hardcore that ever was while I shoot this. Gonna be a quick one. I'm just gonna talk about my entries for Eric Bauer's contest of 4 records. You know, personal anecdotes and sentimental attachments to them, and one of them has to have a cop on it. That's his contest. You should enter, get a chance to win some cool stuff. He's got a little prize pack going. Check out his latest video if you haven't. So yeah, Confused. We actually talked about this recently. I think it was after the stream ended or before it was started. We were talking about European hardcore, but, you know, inevitably Japanese hardcore usually comes up in conversations between Eric and I and Jason, and Confused were one of the noisiest to do it. Some of the stuff was almost borderline unlistenable, but something about this is just super charming and overwhelming and bombastic. Just the feedback and the kind of screechiness of it. I fucking love it. It's just weird because they were heavily influenced by the noisy era of like Chaos UK and Disorder, which I prefer when those bands kind of got a little bit more cohesive with their playing. And I'm in the minority there, you know, but whatever. Confused listening to it. So we'll see if that turns out audibly. I mean, I'm right under the speaker, but this is a directional mic, so we'll see if it even ends up on there. I noticed that it's really selective when I do this. I'm always changing up my audio setup, you know. I also got a brand new computer, so I'm able to come at you in HD. We'll see. On the software for this camera, it just said that I might not be able to go full HD. There was like a little warning thing, but I can do all kinds of fun stuff here. Oh. Hey. Hey-oh. Oh. What else can I do? There's some cool stuff. You can do effects. You can do like Instagram filters on this. Let's see if I can go down. It's not letting me. Oh, here we go. Check it out. I'm a fucking forest ghost. Coming at you in ring wraith vision. Like this. It's cool. You can look like a 90s grunge video. Hadn't seen that one yet. So yeah, lots of fun. Lots of fun. Do some new stuff with technology. I have no idea what I'm doing as usual. You know it. So, 4 picks. So, first up, the cop pick. It's got to have a cop on the cover. We got a riot cop. Scary riot cop right there. Hellkrusher Doomsday Hour, 1996 on Profane Existence and Scald Recordings. It's a nice gatefold. Cool artwork. This was always the one that I had. This and the split with Preparation H. This is very like Doom, Discharge, Extreme Noise, Terror, maybe a little bit, but not blasty or grindy. Mostly like kind of D-beat paced, heavy, growly crust stuff. It's very punk. You know, it's not too complex musically, not too far away from their contemporaries in like Extinction of Mankind, who were similar. I think Extinction of Mankind was maybe a little bit more amoebic-y. This is a great record, super upbeat. They've got a song on it called Fuck You Pal that's like the jam of the record that I put on tons of mixtapes. And I saw these guys in 99 at a Punks Picnic, a small 2-day festival in Nottingham. Almost got in a fight with a guy because I was moshing like an idiot and accidentally kicked him in the nards. Thankfully he took pity on me, and when I apologized thoroughly and made it clear to him that it wasn't intentional, you know, whatever. These things happen. Yeah, it was a really fun gig. They played with Cress. They played with Active Minds played that as well. I'm spacing on who else played it, but they played a lot of stuff off of this because I think it was their most recent record. I picked this up recently, their first album, Wasteland, and it's very different. This is almost like a thrash metal record. I mean, it is crust, but it's that sort of leaning towards early Sacrilege or Onslaught, Power from Hell, like bands that were coming from the Discharge school of things and experimenting with thrash metal, like that end of what influenced whatever crust was, and less of like a Prophecy of Doom or Amoebics kind of thing. There's like the first riff on here is like a Stolen Slayer riff, and it's awesome. almost like crossover. Like, it's a really fucking good record. It's got that kind of gloominess that Crust has, but the riffing is a lot more technical and metal. And it's really, really good. Recommended. This is, I guess they re-recorded it. The original recording of it was pretty bad, but that's been reissued as well, so I'm curious to hear their standards of, like, what was too shitty sounding. Because this has that great, like, weirdly kind of, like, watery, reverbed out guitar tone that a lot of stuff had at the time, you know? I find it charming, but I can see why people would take technical issue with it sound-wise. I think it sounds great. But reissued on Boss Tunage just recently. So yeah, that's my pick for the Cop one, Doomsday Hour. A lot of happy memories of that gig, other than almost getting beat up for dancing like an idiot. Then, Logical Nonsense, Expand the Hive. This, I was just looking at the racks. I think I've talked about this at some point, because I bought this within the last 3 years, and I think it got mentioned in a collection update at some point, but I wanted to go back over it. This was like, this and the other record they had in the day, which name I am forgetting. This and their other LP I listened to Into the Ground. These guys were from the Southwest. I think they were from Phoenix, but they all relocated to the Bay Area, which tracks because they had a split with Grimple and were buddies with them. But this is also heavy crust, a strong, like, early Neurosis, Pain of Mind influence, like a really thick, commanding, deep bass tone, slightly affected vocals, like a little bit of, like, distortion, a little bit of reverb, I think, on the vocals that make them sound kind of inhuman, but not enough to make it sound like processed, like it's an industrial band or something like that. Lots of growling, like really frantic kind of stuff. In a way, it almost sort of reminds me a little bit of, like, Primo era Sepultura, but only slightly, and I'm not sure why. But yeah, I mean, infinitely catchy music. This came out on Alternative Tentacles in 1997, and just as I was starting to discover a lot of crust, this band was blowing up, and I don't know why I'm spacing on the name of their other record, but their other record's equally as good. This is Expand the Hive. Love that. Here's a fun one. This is By the Throat. This is a project EP, side project. Only thing this band ever did. To my knowledge, there might have been a demo, but I've never seen it around. Members from Monster X, Limp Wrist, Devoid of Faith, many others, Eucharist, I think. Tons and tons of stuff. Mark Telfian, John from Monster X, Paul Henry, and Nate Wilson. So an all-star Albany band. I just remember buying this because I was getting back into stuff that was a little bit more brutal at the time, burning out on street punk and such, and discovering crust. And I got this, and I loved it because it had the sort of, like, full throttle sort of slightly noisy hardcore attack that Devoid of Faith had, with those great patented Nate Wilson riffs, but with, like, roaring, monstrous grindcore vocals from John from Monster X. I believe that's his name. John, I think? Johnster X, yeah. So this and the Fit for Abuse 7-inch that I picked up at the same show, you know, it was an era when I only had probably, like, maybe 100 records or something like that, because that's all I could afford, and this is worn out. I should buy another copy. I think it's still reasonable too. It came out on Gloom and Parology and Arashikage Records. I don't know whose imprint that was, so the record needs to be flipped. And then finally, the Last in Line LP. I was reminded of this because I just saw it on Facebook in a record collector group, and I was like, yeah, this is great. I remember when it came out, Western Mass Hardcore, like the band that really helped define what Western Mass Hardcore was in the late 90s up until the early 2000s or so. Lestercito Del Morto on Acme Records, which was the drummer from Out Cold's imprint, I believe. They cover You Hate Me and I Hate You by G.G. Allen on this, and it's just ripping fast hardcore. And this record is so cheap everywhere. You see it for a couple of bucks in all the bins around here. You know, they're a Massachusetts band, and this is one of the best hardcore records of the era. I mean, they're not going for a specific thing, but they're just playing fast hardcore. Like great roaring, deep, pissed off vocals, courtesy of DJ. Certainly an FFO, Negative Approach, Negative Effects kind of band, but a little bit more like fleshed out songwriting. Songs are a bit longer generally than those bands, but just nonstop, full throttle attack. And at the time, I'd been hearing like, all these rumors and stuff about the Western Mass scene and how it was like going back in time to, American hardcore in 1983. Because what was going on in Boston, I mean, there were a few bands like Cops and Robbers and Out Cold, of course, they were kind of on the outskirts of Boston. Like, they were more like in the Lowell area, I believe, doing that. And they gigged with like oi bands and pogo punk bands and stuff. But I heard about how the Western Mass scene had like a pretty dedicated group of people going to shows that was like a couple hundred strong, and it was just crazy because it was these massive circle pits and everything, and it wasn't really a bunch of people like cosplaying UK-82. They were more cosplaying like 80s like American hardcore, and it was really incredible because it was a completely fresh thing at the time, because I loved American hardcore. I loved like all that early 80s stuff, and what I saw was a lot more of the worship of like the pogo punk stuff, which I liked, but my first loves when I was getting into just music from that era generally was a lot of Minor Threat, a lot of the first Agnostic Front record, Negative Approach, etc. I liked the Exploited and GBH, but it didn't really go much deeper than that, and as the years have gone on, I've widened my palette and gotten more into the Partisans and some of the lower tier bands like Attack and further down and more into anarcho-punk and everything. But the stuff that was instantly satisfying to me that I obsessed the hell over was like DRI, before they went metal, AF and all that. And it was like the first case I'd seen going out there of like kids wearing the chain belts like AF and Warzone used to wear like in the early 80s, and like the first time I saw people like wearing flipped up hats again and like that kind of thing. Like that scene was really into like worshiping that era of US hardcore. Obviously that got kind of absorbed. And there's different, like, it was a relatively diverse. There were like really punk as fuck punker kids and like youth crew kids, and everybody seemed to get along. It seemed like there was an era of danger, despite the fact that it was like, a fun hardcore punk experience, I guess. But yeah, I mean, Last in Line were kind of the flag bearers of that, and then you had the Prowl, of course, Dragnet, a whole bunch of other bands. Like Out Cold was part of it, even though they weren't from there. The Strikers. It was cool. It was a cool scene, and I was lucky enough to go to a couple of shows out there, including the Halloween show, which was just fucking nuts. That was like a circle pit so big, my friends and I were standing off to the side, and we could feel air coming, like it was a fan. You could feel like a force of air, because there were like 3 people wide, like running around. I don't know. It was a good time. So that's what that Last in Line record reminds me of. Good shit. They recently played a show with, I'm trying to remember who they played with. They played with Rampage and a few other bands I'm spacing on right now last year before everything shut down, and they still had it. They were fucking awesome. So yeah, that's my 4 picks for Eric's contest. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.